very much. All right, in the meantime, it wasn't just the president and Vladimir Putin talking Venezuela today. Apparently, our top defense military officials were meeting at the Pentagon, also discussing the subject. The acting defense secretary, Patrick Shanahan, for example, saying, as the president said, that all options are on the table with regard to Venezuela. Retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel Dakota Wood with us right now. Colonel, thank you for taking the time. When we talk about all options, obviously the inference there is military as well, but it wouldn't presumably be military alone or U.S. military alone, correct?
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you're the administration in the U.S., you're going to maintain all options. You don't want to write something off because whatever opposition you might be trying to account for is going to take advantage of that. So to say that all options are on the table is clearly the right diplomatic move to make. Behind the scenes, though, as you've indicated there at the Pentagon, what is it that you would want the military to do? So you would have to define the objectives, rules of engagement, and whether it's wise or not to insert U.S. military forces. Our position would be that it is not wise to do that, but we'll have to see what the administration settles on.
Colonel, did you read anything into the different reads on Russia we got from the Secretary of State pretty much all this week, especially talking yesterday about the Russians' presumed role in blocking Maduro from even leaving his country, if that were in fact the case, and the president's friendly chat with Putin just today?
You know, it's how you define that, right? So involved in what way? Is it Russia putting military forces on the ground to secure the Maduro regime, as they've done in Syria, right, with Bashar al-Assad? Or is it more political influence meddling? I mean, if you're Vladimir Putin, you want to keep Maduro in power because that's somebody you can work with, and you kind of mess up the U.S. game plan in our own hemisphere and distract us elsewhere.
I'm sorry. What if it were more overt and the Russians were preventing Maduro from leaving the country if there was some sort of agreement for him to peacefully leave and allow Guaido to take over?
Yeah, well, there's a range of U.S. options available to the president, only one of which would be military. You've got economic, you've got sanctions, you've got other moves on other fronts that you could use to signal to Moscow that we don't want you messing in the Western Hemisphere.
Do you see this escalate? I mean, how many days could people be rioting and protesting, especially when Maduro frames it as a flagrant violation? And, you know, his next crackdown could be much, much worse, especially if he maintains the backing, as he largely has now, of these generals who are not breaking from him.
Well, I mean, I think that question needs to be really addressed, is that the military has basically taken itself out of the equation. And where Maduro is placing his bets are on these private, almost criminal gangs that he can buy or rent. So when he's looking for somebody to provide him physical security, it's these criminal elements, these militias for hire. It's not the military. So the intel chief has defected to the opposition. The military side is basically staying neutral to see where the dust settles. And so in terms of a military or physical security standpoint, Maduro only has these criminal gang types of elements to rely on.
That sounds like the makings of a civil war.
It does, and then it goes back to the central question. If the U.S. wants to intervene militarily, to what end? I mean, what is it you're trying to accomplish? So the U.S. and 40-some-odd other countries have recognized the legitimacy of Guaido as the interim president. Diplomatically, that's where we're at on this thing. But that's a different type of involvement in the domestic political situation of Venezuela, where Guaido's political party, what he represents, is problematic. We certainly don't like Maduro, but that's a different discussion when you get into direct military intervention, and that's something we need to stay away from for the time being.
Colonel, thank you very, very much. Well,